Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Part 3, Day 2. Day 1, there was a deer hunt. Gawain got a kiss from the lady and returned it to the Lord. And we'll see how Day 2 goes. So, they decided to make the same deal for the next day. Well, the Lord's going out hunting. Whatever he wins, he's going to give to Gawain. Whatever Gawain wins in the castle, he's going to give to the Lord. You may ask yourself, why would Gawain accept this deal knowing sort of what's going to come to him? Remember, the Lord has told him that he knows where the Green Chapel is and that he will assign a guide to take Gawain there on the day that he needs to meet him. Gawain has no idea where the Green Chapel is, and so he's reliant on the hospitality of the Lord, and he's got to stay in the Lord's good graces. And so this is the way to complete the quest. If he angers the Lord, if he refuses the Lord's hospitality, he may never complete the quest that he's been sent on, and so he would be called a coward forever, and he would be a failure. So you got to sort of weigh the balance here. When the cock had crowed and cackled for the third time, the Lord had leaped from his blankets and his men were around him. Now, by the way, this guy's clearly a morning person. Maybe this is why his wife doesn't like him. Maybe this is why she's after Gawain. He can get up in the morning and be like, boom, I'm out of bed, I'm going. I mean, like, what? I would divorce him too. But anyway, they ate their food and heard their mass, and all were gone to the wood before light had gleamed. Huntsmen and horns ran loud across the fields, following hounds racing in the leaves. One of the things I didn't mention here that I think is worth mentioning too is that we've got sort of a montage of fall on these 3 days. The first day, all the leaves are in the trees. The beaters are going through the trees, and you have this beautiful fall hunting scene. Now all the leaves are on the ground, so it seems like overnight there's sort of a condensed speed here. Fall is approaching winter. Overnight, all the leaves have fallen and they're all on the ground, and now you have the sound of the leaves as hunters walk through them. Quickly they caught a scent along a marsh, and the master of the hounds encouraged their baying, shouting wild words. And the hounds that heard him or heard the barking, 40 at once, hurried to the chase, and such a babbling uproar of dogs whirled up that rocks and cliffs rang. The huntsmen urged them on, blowing bugles and yelling, and they rushed along in a pack between a forest pool and a high cliff, and in a knoll near the marsh, at the foot of a cliff, with boulders tumbled about, men and dogs stopped, then nosed around that knoll in the rocks. Can you guys hear the alliterative verse still going strong? Nosed around the knoll in the rocks, until they knew he was trapped, the beast that bloodhounds had run to the ground. And they beat on the bushes and called him out, and he crashed at a line of men, came rushing through, the most marvelous boar, driven from his own herd by old age, but the hoariest, fiercest, hugest boar in the world, charging out, grunting. So let's look at the description of this boar. It's a very dangerous boar. He's been driven out of his own herd by old age. Hoariest is an interesting word. Hoary is a really old word for white-haired. If something's hoary, hoary is a frost word, a cold word, so it's a winter connection. That's when something gets covered with hoarfrost, But of course, hoariest. Like if the animal is going to predict the behavior of the woman in the upcoming scene, and you're reading this and you're like, hoariest, it's sort of funny. Fiercest, hugest boar in the world, but fierce, huge. So the boar is deadly. Came charging out, grunting, and he drove. Let's see if we can do that. 3 of them to the ground, and they shouted and cried out. So there's a 3, right? I said you're going to see a lot of 3s in these passages. But they ran past quickly. He ran past quickly, not anxious to fight. Ho, hey, hey, they hallooed and rallied the hounds with their horns. And men and dogs lifted their voices and ran behind him, noisily racing to a kill. And often he spun about and stood and sliced with his snout and ripped a yelping, leaping dog and routed the rest. And the hunters rushed as close as they dared, raining arrows on his back, hitting him over and over, but hurting nothing. The skin on his shoulders was like steel. It's a simile. But the arrows are ineffective against the boar. Think about how effective they were against the deer, and that the arrows may be symbolic of like words and gestures that Gawain is going to make in the upcoming bedroom temptation scene. And no point could pierce his forehead. The smooth shafts shivered and broke. The metal bounced away. And after a time, the blows began to bother him. And foaming at the mouth, he rushed at the men and hurt them. And many drew back in fear. Not the Lord. On a light horse he galloped behind him, sounding his horn, calling his hunters, riding boldly after the boar in the thick brushwood till the sun sank low. And all day long they raced through the wood, while our gracious Gawain or Gawain, lay quiet and comfortable in his bed, lay easy in bright-colored blankets and sheets. So we have the transition. The Lord is out here hunting all day long. Meanwhile, in the bedroom, so we're shifting scenes here. We're going to shift them with a quatrain. And the lady remembered and came to greet him early in the morning, seeking some change in his frame of mind. She peered through the curtain, and courteous Gawain gave her a warm welcome. So this time Gawain's not pretending to be asleep. He knows what's coming. He's aware. And she gave him back as good as she got, sat softly at his side, laughed lightly, and said with a cheerful grace, "Ah, sir, can you really be Gawain? Your soul reaches up for goodness and holiness, nothing else. Polite manners escape you. Talk the truth, you carefully forget it. Yesterday I gave you instructions in the greatest of love's lessons, and today it is gone." Right? So she comes in and she's like, "You're always paying attention to faith and purity, but you're dropping the ball on courtesy, boy." Right? So like she's, starting out aggressive, if you will. You're failing your code of chivalry, Gawain. And so he's got to try and solve that. "What lesson?" he asked. "Tell me again. Whatever I've lost, the fault must be mine." There's humility, right? "And yet," said that lovely, "what I taught you was kissing. Whenever a lady's looks, ask it, claim it. That is courtesy, knight." So she says, let me teach you about courtesy. When a woman looks at you like she wants to be kissed, it's your duty to kiss her. And you're dropping the ball on this one, Gawain. So she's sort of like, when she tilts her head up and parts her lips and starts batting her eyes and leaning into you, you know she wants to be kissed. And of course, she's probably doing this as she's saying it. And so Gawain's got to solve this problem. Now, she hasn't technically asked for anything here. She's just saying, courtesy says you should kiss a woman who looks like she wants to be kissed. So how is Gawain going to respond to that? "Oh, no," said that soldier. "You're wrong, my dear. I cannot dare where I might be denied. How wrong I would be to ask an unwanted kiss." So Gawain's like, how am I going to know if you want to be kissed? What if I kissed you and you didn't want to be kissed? Isn't that worse? So he's playing the man card. Like, I don't know when you want to be kissed. How am I supposed to know? I'm not observant, right? "By our Lord," said the Lord's wife, "you're far too strong to accept a no if anyone were boorish enough to deny you." So there's that sort of card that she played last time. You could take the kiss if you wanted to. You're too strong and I'm too weak and I don't want to resist anyway, right? Like, so there's that same sort of line of reasoning. But note that she gets the word boorish in here. Boorish means sort of like rude or uncultured. So aha, again, like boorish, like it's all connecting. "You're right," Gawain exclaimed, "except that force and threats are indecent with friends, and unwilling gifts are given in vain. My lips are yours to kiss on command, lady, as long as you like or as short. Just tell me." So Gawain, he plays his good move here. He's going to keep his courtesy. He's like, "I'll kiss you whenever you want. You just need to tell me that you want to be kissed." And how romantic is that, right? I mean, seriously, you got to tell him that you want to be kissed. You got to be like, "Kiss." Like, that's not romantic. And so this is a good way to do what the lady asks without engaging in a romantic relationship. However, he says he'll kiss her when she wants to be kissed. So she bent to his face and kissed him well. So that's one kiss. We're keeping the counter going today. And they argued sadness and grace loves heavens and hells. Look that we got heaven and hell in here. This is just a little reminder to you as a reader that this encounter is an encounter for Gawain's immortal soul. If he gives in to temptation and goes all the way with this lady, then he's going to be doomed to hell. "Tell me, knight," said that noble lady, "without being angry, just why so young and bold, so vigorous a man, so knightly, so courteous, and your name is known far and wide, and a knight's good name rests most on his loyalty to love, his learning in its weaponry, and stories of love's true warriors are title and text inscribed in their love deeds. Risking their lives for a beloved, enduring in that great name great grief and pain, finally finding revenge and destroying sorrow, earning happiness in their true love's arms. Just why so young and handsome a knight, so famous in your time, could find me sitting at your bedside not once but twice, and never reveal that your head could hold a single word of love? Not one. A knight so ready with gracious vows should eagerly open his treasures to an innocent girl, teach her some signs of true love's skill. Ha! Is your heart unlettered despite your fame? Do I seem too stupid? For shame, I've come alone, tame, for the study of love's high game. Come, while we're still alone, teach me till my husband comes home. Whoa! Okay, we got to unpack this. We got to analyze exactly what she says here and how she says it. This seems like a straight request, right? Like, and that's going to be tricky. So let's go back a page. This is a really complicated construction. I imagine it was difficult for Burton Raphael to translate this from Middle English into modern English because it's so complicated. It's a sentence, but let's look at the sentence here. Tell me, without being angry, just why so young and bold and vigorous. You're so vigorous, Gawain, right? Like, so knightly and courteous. So she's complimenting him, trying to play on his pride. But she cuts her sentence right there. You see this? This is a break in the sentence. So let's finish the original sentence. Let's go back to the break on the other side. So she says, tell me why such a great knight, just why so young and handsome a knight, so famous in your time, more compliments, could find me sitting at your bedside not once but twice and never revealed that your head could hold a single word of love, not one. So essentially the sentence is like, you're such a great knight. How is it that you haven't told me you love me yet? Like, I've come twice and I'm super hot and you should be telling me that you love me. Like, that's how this goes. We kiss, we spend some time together, you fall in love. I've read stories of knights. This is how it works. And in fact, we're going to look at the little middle bit of that sentence to sort of make sense of it, because she cuts herself off and she says, your name is known far and wide, and a knight's good name rests most on his loyalty to love. So she says essentially, Gawain, you're a romantic hero. You're well known for being a romantic hero. Young knights are supposed to fall in love with princesses, even if they're not allowed to. That's what happens in these medieval romance stories. Lancelot falls in love with Guinevere. She's the wife of his king and his best friend. That's pretty normal. So why aren't you falling in love with me is sort of the question that's implied here. She also says that a knight's good name rests on his loyalty to love, his learning and its weaponry, meaning a knight, a romantic hero, knows a lot about love, and she expects that Gawain knows a whole lot about love too, if you know what I mean, right? And so then she has a parenthesis in here that says, and stories of love's true warriors, in other words, romantic heroes like Gawain, are a title in text inscribed in their love deeds, risking their lives for a beloved, enduring in that great name, great grief and pain, finally finding revenge and destroying their sorrow, earning happiness in their true love's arms. So in stories of knights, the knight falls in love with a woman, and he goes off on a quest to prove his love to the woman, and then the woman rewards him for his devotion, physically, generally. Right, and so this is what she's talking about. So theoretically, she can claim that this whole thing is about stories of King Arthur and knights. So, you know, when she says, get back to the story, just why so young and handsome a knight, so famous in your time, could find me, the hottest woman in the world, sitting next to your bedside, not once but twice, and never reveal that your head could hold a single word of love, not one. Essentially, she's saying, like, it's rude. It's rude. You're a knight. I'm a lady. I know how this is supposed to work. You're supposed to tell me you love me, and I've come twice, 2 times, and you haven't said a word of love. Not one. It's rude, right? So she's calling out his courtesy again. But then she says, a knight so ready with gracious vows should eagerly open his treasures. That's probably innuendo. To an innocent girl, teach her some signs of true love's skill. So when you're a romantic hero, you're extremely well educated in love. And she's like, and I'm just an innocent girl who has only known this one guy, my husband, my entire life. And so I want you to teach me, you know, like, you know, all this stuff about love, teach it to me. Now, there's 2 levels of meaning here. The surface level is, you know, like, she could claim that she's just talking about medieval romances. Gawain, will you just sit here and tell me some stories of King Arthur? You know, like, you know all about the knights, you know all about this stuff. And so when you read the rest of this, is your heart unlettered? That word unlettered seems to imply that she's talking about reading stories, but heart seems to imply that she's talking about love. Despite your fame, do I seem too stupid for shame? I've come alone tame for the study of love's high game. Come while we're still alone, teach me till my husband comes home. So she may be like, hey, sit down and let's talk about King Arthur. Like, that's a surface meaning. And of course, this has an allusion to, you're probably not familiar with, but there's this famous story, the letters of Abelard and Eloise. This is from the French. Abelard was a tutor, sort of a knightly tutor, and he was trying to teach a young woman who was a princess or a lord's daughter how to read and write and understand literature and stuff. And so he started telling her all the stories of King Arthur and his knights. And of course, they fell in love over the course of this. And so they sort of got married. Well, no, they ran away and they weren't supposed to. And so, like, that's maybe what we're referencing here. But also, there's a clear secondary meaning. And anybody who's reading this passage knows what that meaning is. Gawain is an expert in love. He's a medieval knight, and she is innocent, and she's like, "Come teach me about love." So, like, I feel like we need a way to talk about this without being explicit. What she's essentially saying is that Gawain is an epic. I need a euphemism. He's really skilled at the game of Twister. And so, as a skilled Twister player, she would like to learn his moves, right? And so she's like, "Yeah, why don't you come show me how to play this game of Twister, right?" Like, and that's what's going on here. How is Gawain going to respond? Because this is an overt request. Teach me while we're still alone till my husband comes home. Like, boom. So how does Gawain respond? Remember that his immortal soul is up for grabs here. And what he wants to do versus what he's going to do. And you as a reader, you put yourself in his situation. What would you do? These are all questions that we want to think about. Tries to reward you, said Gawain. Note that every time he responds to something like this, he invokes God or Jesus or the Virgin Mary, all of these things, faith as a shield. Remember, on the inside of his shield, he had the Virgin Mary painted. So I think you can see that how he's using this. This is her attack. He's using his faith to parry it. And so that shield metaphor comes back here as well. Christ reward you, said Gawain. I can't tell you, lady, how delighted I am that one so noble and knowing as you would come here, would care to sport with so humble a knight, would grant me a single warm glance. But for me to try to tell you true love's rules, repeat romances to you, knowing that you know everything I could say and more, are wiser in love than 100 like me could be if I lived to be 100, this would make me 100-fold fool. All right, pause. Actually, let's just finish the thing. As best I can, I want to obey you. This is my duty now and forever, to serve you, my lady, so help me God. So he ends with God and begins with God here. But let's look at this sounds super polite, right? Like, and humble, but let's analyze it. So he says, I can't tell you, lady, how delighted I am that one so noble and knowing as you. So she casts herself as innocent, but he seems to be suggesting that she's not innocent. She casts herself as somebody who doesn't know anything about love and romance, and he's like, nah, you're knowing. Would come here, would care to sport with so humble a knight. So he's like, yeah, I'm the one who's innocent here. Would grant me a single warm glance. But for me to try to tell you true love's rules, repeat romances to you, knowing that you know everything I could say and more, are wiser in love than 100 like me could be if I lived to be 100. So it seems like he's complimenting her and saying that she's so wise. But the reality is he's saying you have more experience than me. You're not the innocent one here. I'm the innocent one here, even though I'm a romantic hero. And you know more about love than 100 like me could be if I lived to be 100. So he's essentially saying, what's 100 times 100? 10,000? You're 10,000 times more experienced than I am. So in a very real way, he's calling her a strumpet. Actually, let's rhyme it with boar, right? Like, he's straight up calling her a whore here, right? Like, he's like, you clearly know more about love than I do. And it's rude. So here comes your rudeness. You see the lady being aggressive. We talked about that in the boar hunt. He tries to fend her off politely. It doesn't really work. She asks him outright. And now he's got his first real chivalry paradox. She's asked him to do something and he's saying no. You can see it. As best I can, I want to obey you. So he's like, lady, I'd like to. Trust me. I want to. But he can't, And so she tested him. pushed and probed, trying to tempt him, pretending love. And Gawain was so gracefully evasive that he seemed always polite, and nothing happened but happiness. They laughed and fenced, and at the end, offering a courtly kiss, off she went. So how many kisses have we got now? 2 today. Interesting progression. Day 1 is 1 kiss. Day 2 is 2 kisses. And the knight rose, made ready for mass, then sat to a splendid dinner. He sported with the Lord's 2 ladies all day, while the Lord was racing over the field. So that's the end of the bedroom temptation scene. Now we're back to part 3. The Lord's going to finish his hunt of the boar, and then we've got the reunion scene coming up immediately after that. So, let's see. While the Lord was racing over fields after the ferocious boar that rushed up hillsides and broke the backs of his best hounds, holed in till arrows drove him on, out of shelter to run in the open, arrows falling like flies on his hide, he held them off, leaping, wild, until at last running was over, and weary he worked his way to a rocky hole over a river. Great alliteration here. The hill was behind him, his hooves pawed at the ground, foam grimaced on his snout, and he sharpened his tusks, waiting. Tired and still afraid, the hunter stood safely to the side. They wanted to annoy him, but no one came near. So many had been gored by those tusks that fear of being torn held them. He seemed wild. He seemed weird. And then the Lord rode up, urging his horse, and saw him holed in and his hunters watching. He jumped lightly down, drew his bright polished sword, and began to approach him, hurrying across the ford to his hole. And the boar saw him, saw his bright sword, and his hackles rose, and he snorted so loud that the hunters were afraid for their lord's life. Then the beast rushed out at him straight and quick. This is a great scene. The boar is like in sort of an oxbow of a river against the cliff, nowhere to run to. The Lord's crossing the river, and the boar comes charging. There's water foaming up everywhere. It's a really sort of epic encounter scene. The man and the boar blended in steaming white water, but the boar had the worst, for the Lord had measured his charge and aimed his sword into his throat and planted it deep, down to the hilt, so the heart was cut, and snarling as he fell, the boar surrendered and dropped. So the Lord takes down the boar with one swift cut to the heart. See how this may be similar to what just happened in the bedroom scene? The lady propositioned Gawain, and he took her down with one swift insult to the heart, if you will. And 100 hounds leaped as he stopped, and hunters pulled him to the ground, and dogs bit him down. I don't know what's going on with my lighting here, but whatever. And the horns sounded 100 victory calls, and the men who still could, shouted in triumph. And the master of the hounds made his beasts bay and bark, and a hunter trained to the art happily began to carve that boar. He cut off the head and planted it high on a post, then tore deep. Here comes the cutting up of the boar scene again. Then tore deep along the backbone, hauling out the intestines, broiled on coals dressed with bread they were fed to the dogs. Then he cut out the meat in gleaming slabs, removing the edible guts for later roasting, and hung the 2 halves together, and roped them to a heavy rod. Then they hurried home, carrying the carcass. The head was paraded in front of the Lord himself, who had battled the boar to death with his own strong hands. The trek to his hall and Gawain seemed longer than all the long hunt. He came, he called, and there Gawain stands, laughing loud, shouting a merry speech. The Lord exulted, seeing Gawain. His ladies came, and the court, and he showed them the thick flesh, told them how huge a beast he had fought, how fierce when they'd finally cornered him deep in the forest. And Gawain gave him the praise he deserved, told him how well he'd proved his worth. So immense a beast, such massive slabs of meat he'd never seen before. They hefted that huge head, and Gawain admired it, and admired the Lord's fierce courage in cutting it off. Now again, Gawain's head is being chopped off day after tomorrow at this point. So showing him a head on a pole is going to be an interesting thing, eliciting, both awe and maybe a disturbing reaction from Gawain himself. Also, just another fun fact. Remember that the pagan holiday of Yule was celebrated with a wild boar, which is why we still have the echo of it with the Christmas ham in our culture. And so this boar was seasonally appropriate as well. Where was I? Now, Gawain, it's yours. We've agreed, you know the game. That's settled. I know, said the knight, and just as truly let me give you once more everything I got for myself. He embraced the Lord and kissed him, and immediately kissed him again. We are quit, said Gawain, here tonight as we agreed to be. The bond has been kept to the letter and complete. So Gawain gives him the two kisses, and so they're free and clear. But look at the Lord's response here. Ah, by St. Giles, swore the Lord, I can't compete. There's nothing you won't afford if you always trade so sweet. Wait, what? So this is the kind of line that creates some interesting theories in readers. There's a certain amount of sexual tension between the Lord and Gawain, mostly on the Lord's side. This idea that is the Lord gay? Like what's going on here? He's like, yeah, those are some great kisses. I wish you'd give me some more. Like it's strange by medieval standards to look at this and think about what's going on here. Is the Lord gay is a question you want to think about. And actually, when you stop and think about it, there are some reasons to support it. Like, number one, it would explain why his wife is so unhappy. Number two, it might explain this weird deal that he's made, this game. I mean, if he's gay and the wife knows he's gay, then like this is maybe a win-win scenario for both of them. Like, she and Gawain get together and then Gawain has to so maybe there's something there. I mean, you can think about it from a number of angles, and certainly it's an interesting scenario that the story has set up, and we definitely want to think about that. They set up tables on the trestles, covered them with cloths, and kindled a bright light with wax torches mounted on the walls. Men rushed about with platters and meat, and around the blazing fire they laughed and were happy, singing both at supper and after a host of beautiful songs, Christmas part songs and untried carols, as merry as men can tell of. And always the Lord's lady was seated beside Gawain. And so loving were her glances, her speech, her winks, her secret marks of favor. I don't know what those are. I'm thinking about I don't know, that the knight was stunned and angry with himself, but courtesy kept him civil. He made himself gracious and kind, no matter how twisted things turned. So this has got to be an awkward evening for Gawain. They're all sitting there having a feast of boar or whatever, and the lady sits next to Gawain and is loving him with her looks and giving him secret marks of favor, and he's angry and he's upset, but he's a knight and he can't in courtesy be like, you are a strumpet, like in front of everybody, because it's rude. And so he holds to his vow of courtesy, which he broke in private. Remember that he did call her out just a page ago. And so, he has sort of broken his chivalry. His chivalry is not entirely intact anymore because he had to refuse the lady in order to keep his honor and purity and faith intact. Let's see, where was I? And when food and laughter had ended together, they gathered where a fire burned in a private chamber and chatted and drank and wondered whether to make the same agreement for New Year's Eve. And Gawain asked to leave in the morning, arguing that his time had almost come. But the Lord argued against it. As I am a knight, I give you my word, Gawain, that you'll get to that green chapel and your errand there early on New Year's Day. You rest high in your room. I'll hunt in the forest, and we'll hold our agreement as it was, trading profit for profit. For I've tested you twice, and you've proved yourself true. The third throw will come up best. Cast the die, drink while you can, and rejoice, for sorrow we can have whenever we seek it. And Gawain agreed to stay, and they drank it in wine, then walked behind torches to their beds. Gawain slept peaceful and quiet, but the Lord dressed early. He had tricks to try. So the Lord convinces Gawain to do this one more time. Gawain's like, oh, no, I don't want to do this. I know what's coming. But the Lord, who has the power here because Gawain's his guest and because he knows where the Green Chapel is and he's going to give him a guide, talks Gawain into this challenge one more time with the words, I've tested you twice and you proved yourself true, which is an interesting phrase. The third throw will come up best. This is a dice throwing metaphor. We'll see what happens. So we can also make a guess as to what the animal being hunted the third day comes down to. Gawain slept peaceful and quiet, but the Lord dressed early. He had tricks to try. Think about that. I'm going to pull up the PowerPoint and we'll fill it out. So coming back to sort of our table here, right? Day 2 is a wild boar. The boar we said was representative of aggression and rudeness, both of which play out in the bedroom/temptation scene, right? The lady's aggressive. She starts off right where she left off with kissing, pressuring Gawain. Ultimately, she crosses that line and directly asks Gawain to, quote, teach her about love until her husband comes home. he has to reject her, thereby damaging his code of chivalry, which was perfect up until this point. He calls her 10,000 times more experienced in love than he is. You're more experienced in love than 100 like me could be if I lived to be 100. In total, they share 2 kisses, and she leaves seemingly hurt. The boar resists arrows, kills hounds, and injures men, which perhaps represents the damage to Gawain's code. It is killed by a swift blow to the heart, very much like the lady is defeated by a swift blow to the heart. And Gawain returns the 2 kisses to the Lord, thereby keeping most of his code of chivalry intact. And then we find out that day 3, the final day of this part 3, the Lord, quote unquote, has tricks to try, which maybe you put 2 and 2 together and realized we're dealing with a fox here. And what are foxes known for? This is a fox hunt. Foxes are traditionally known to be tricky or sly. You sly fox, like that kind of thing. There's also foxes have been associated with sexuality, like Foxy Lady. I think there's a song by Jimi Hendrix. So there's that as well. But finally, foxes are well known for being thieves. Anybody who ever watched Dora the Explorer knows that Swiper swipes. That's what he does. Foxes steal eggs. If you read the Fantastic Mr. Fox, great book, by the way, kids book. There's lots of references to this, and that would have been stable and true in sort of the symbolism back then as well. So, we're left with this question, who's going to be sly and tricky, and who's going to be a thief, and what's going to be stolen, and we'll have to see how this all plays out when we look at what happens in the hunting scene and the bedroom scene and the reunion scene moving forward. So, let's just prep you. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. I'm going to leave you with that image, and we're going to call today's lecture done. Thanks.